Take your fake papers and get out, boy! Sandra snatched Marcus's passport and ripped it apart. She threw the pieces at his face, then swept his boarding pass off the counter. The documents scattered across the terminal floor like confetti. Sandra stepped on his first-class ticket, grinding her heel into the expensive paper. "Security!" she shouted, pointing at Marcus like he was a criminal. "We have someone trying to use fraudulent documents." Every passenger at gate B12 turned to stare. Phones appeared instantly. A college student went live on TikTok. Business travelers whispered and shook their heads in disgust. At him, not her. Marcus stood motionless in his modest black suit, watching his torn diplomatic passport being trampled by strangers' feet. His leather messenger bag remained perfectly positioned at his side. The 6:47 p.m. crowd pressed closer, hungry for drama. Have you ever been so publicly destroyed that everyone celebrated your humiliation until they learned the truth? Countdown device. Flight 447 to Washington, D.C. boards in 22 minutes. Sandra's voice carried across the terminal with theatrical authority. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing a security delay due to fraudulent documentation." She gestured toward Marcus like a prosecutor presenting evidence to a jury. College student Zoe Carter adjusted her phone angle, capturing every moment for her TikTok live. The viewer count climbed steadily. 89, 156, 247 people watching in real time. Comments flooded the screen faster than she could read them. "This doesn't look legitimate," Sandra announced, holding up a torn piece of Marcus's passport to the overhead light. She squinted at it with exaggerated suspicion, as if examining a counterfeit bill. "The photo doesn't even match. Look at this poor quality printing." Marcus remained perfectly still. "Ma'am, that's a valid U.S. diplomatic passport issued by the State Department." "Diplomatic?" Sandra's laugh was sharp and mocking. "Right. And I suppose you're some kind of ambassador?" She turned to her colleague Janet Rodriguez, stage whispering loud enough for half the gate to hear. "Third suspicious case this week. They're getting bolder with these fake documents." The boarding announcement crackled overhead. "Flight 447 to Washington Dulles will begin boarding in 20 minutes. Janet nodded knowingly and picked up her radio. "We need supervisor assistance at gate B12. Possible document fraud situation. The subject is claiming diplomatic status." A businessman in a Rolex adjusted his position to get a better view, phone already recording. His expression showed the kind of satisfied disgust people reserve for witnessing someone get what they deserve. Behind him, an elderly woman clutched her pearls and whispered to her companion about people like that trying to scam the system. Marcus's government-issued BlackBerry buzzed insistently in his jacket pocket. The sound was subtle, but Sandra's trained ear caught it immediately. "Sir, please remove any electronic devices and place them on the counter," she commanded. "We need to verify you're not using communication equipment for illegal purposes. Could be coordinating with accomplices." "I'm not required to surrender my phone without probable cause," Marcus replied evenly. Sandra's eyes narrowed. "Are you refusing to cooperate with airline security? Because that's a federal offense under the Aviation Security Act." The crowd murmured approval. Someone behind Marcus muttered, "Just do what she says, man. Stop making this harder." Another voice added, "If you've got nothing to hide, why are you being so difficult?" A mother pulled her young daughter closer, whispering, "This is why we always follow the rules, honey." The child stared at Marcus with wide, frightened eyes, as if he might explode at any moment. Zoe's live stream had reached 412 viewers. The comments section was a battlefield. "Why won't he just show ID? This is racist AF. They never do this to white people. Something's definitely fishy here. Passport looked fake. Gate agent is just doing her job. People need to comply. Betty's got warrants." Marcus slowly reached into his jacket and placed his phone on the counter. As he did, the edge of a laminated card became visible in his wallet. Something official with a government seal and bold lettering. But Sandra was too focused on her performance to notice the details. "Now," she continued, "I need to see 3 forms of additional identification: driver's license, credit cards, social security card, and proof of your flight purchase with a matching payment method." "The passport you destroyed was sufficient identification for international travel," Marcus said quietly. "Was sufficient," Sandra emphasized. "But since it was clearly fraudulent, we need authentic documents." She crossed her arms and tilted her head with mock concern. Unless, of course, you don't have any real identification. The gate area had transformed into an amphitheater. Passengers abandoned their seats to form a loose circle around the counter. Some held phones aloft like torches. Others whispered theories about Marcus's supposed crimes, speculating about everything from identity theft to terrorism. A security guard approached, his radio crackling with static. "We got a problem here?" he asked Sandra, barely glancing at Marcus. "Suspected document fraud and failure to cooperate," Sandra replied importantly. "He's been evasive and argumentative, refused initial compliance requests." Marcus's messenger bag sat precisely at his feet, leather, expensive but understated. A small luggage tag dangled from the handle. VIP services, priority handling, diplomatic courier. But the growing crowd blocked most people's view of such details. His boarding pass lay crumpled on the floor where Sandra had thrown it. If anyone bothered to smooth it out, they'd see first class, government rate, official travel, printed clearly across the top. But nobody was looking at evidence anymore. They were watching a show. 18 minutes until boarding, the overhead announcement reminded everyone. Janet returned with a supervisor's badge gleaming on her chest. "What's the situation, Sandra?" "Subject attempted to board using falsified documentation. Claims it's a diplomatic passport, but look at these obvious irregularities." Sandra handed over the torn pieces like a detective presenting evidence at trial. The supervisor, a thin man named David Walsh, examined the fragments with the same theatrical suspicion Sandra had displayed. "These security features don't look right to me," he declared, though he was clearly guessing. "The watermark's all wrong, and this seal looks printed rather than embossed." Marcus's phone buzzed again. This time, the screen lit up briefly, showing multiple missed calls from numbers with DC area codes. A text message preview appeared. "Confirmed for 9 a.m. congressional hearing on airline oversight." But Sandra quickly flipped the phone face down. "No communication during security procedures," she snapped. "Could be deleting evidence or contacting criminal associates. 16 minutes to board." The crowd pressed closer, sensing the climax approaching. Zoe's live stream now had 789 viewers and climbing. She whispered commentary to her audience. "This is insane, y'all. They've got this man surrounded like he's a terrorist or something. The comments are going crazy." A woman with a "Make America Great Again" hat nodded approvingly at Sandra's thorough investigation. "Finally, someone doing their job properly," she said loud enough for Marcus to hear. "Too many people think they can just waltz onto planes these days," her husband added. "Bet he doesn't even have a ticket. Probably trying to sneak onto the plane." David Walsh held up his hand for attention. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step over here for additional screening." He pointed to a corner area away from the boarding gate. "We need to verify your identity and conduct a full background check before allowing you anywhere near that aircraft." As Marcus gathered his belongings, his wallet shifted slightly. For just a moment, a gold government seal became visible on what looked like an official identification card with Department of Transportation clearly visible. But the lighting was poor, and everyone was focused on his supposed guilt rather than looking for signs of his innocence. 14 minutes until boarding begins. Countdown, 12 minutes until boarding begins. "Move away from the gate area," David Walsh commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd watched too many cop shows. "We're establishing a security perimeter." Marcus walked slowly toward the designated corner, his measured steps drawing more attention. Every eye in Gate B12 followed his movement. The crowd parted reluctantly, as if afraid to get too close to a suspected criminal. "This is ridiculous," whispered a young woman to her boyfriend. "They're treating him like he's got a bomb." "Shh," her boyfriend hissed back. "You don't know what he might have done. Better safe than sorry." Sandra's voice rose above the murmur. "Sir, empty your pockets completely. Everything on the table. We need to catalog all items for the federal report." Marcus complied silently, placing his wallet, keys, and a small leather portfolio on the makeshift inspection table. As he set down the portfolio, a corner of the official letterhead became visible, embossed with an eagle seal and Department of Transportation, barely legible in the fold. But Sandra was too intoxicated by her moment of power to notice details. She was performing for an audience that grew larger by the minute. 10 minutes to boarding," the announcement echoed. Janet approached with two more security guards. David, we've got a corporation on the line. They want a full incident report with photos and witness statements. Good, Sandra interjected. Make sure they know how thoroughly we handled this security threat. Some of these people think they can just flash fake documents and intimidate hard-working Americans. A middle-aged man in a cowboy hat called out, "Don't let him lawyer up, make him talk." The crowd murmured agreement. Someone shouted, "Yeah, enough of this political correctness." Zoe's live stream had exploded to 1,200 viewers. She repositioned her phone to capture the growing crowd while whispering commentary. "Y'all, this is getting out of control. They've got like 6 people surrounding him now. The comments are going absolutely insane." The comments were brutal. "Why is he so calm? Suspicious AF. Innocent people get upset when falsely accused. His calmness proves he's guilty. This is what happens when you try to scam airlines. Bet he's done this before, probably has a criminal record. Where's his accent if he's really American?" A businessman with a briefcase pushed through the crowd. "Excuse me, is this going to delay our flight? I have meetings in D.C. tonight that can't be postponed." "Sir, please step back," David Walsh ordered. "We're dealing with a potential federal crime here. This could involve national security." The words national security sent a chill through the crowd. Parents pulled children closer. Business travelers started making backup flight arrangements on their phones. Marcus's BlackBerry buzzed again. The screen displayed, "Urgent, Secretary Morrison, call immediately regarding tomorrow's hearing." Sandra snatched the phone before Marcus could react. "No communications during investigation," she declared triumphantly. "This could be evidence of a conspiracy." "That's government property," Marcus said, his first hint of steel entering his voice. "Everything's government property when you're using fake IDs," Sandra shot back. "Janet, bag this as evidence and get photos of everything." 8 minutes to boarding. The crowd had swollen to nearly 60 people. Passengers from adjacent gates abandoned their own flights to witness the drama. A teenager held up an iPad, broadcasting live to Facebook. An older man with a press badge pushed forward, a blogger for Aviation Weekly who sensed a viral story. "What's your name, sir?" the blogger called out. "Are you willing to make a statement about these charges? Do you have any connection to terrorist organizations?" Marcus remained silent, but his eyes tracked to his leather portfolio on the table. Inside that portfolio lay documents that would change everything: congressional hearing schedules, federal budget reports, and his official Department of Transportation identification card. 2 TSA agents arrived, their radios crackling with official chatter. "We need to clear this area," the senior agent announced. "Everyone not directly involved needs to move back to a safe distance." But instead of dispersing, the crowd pressed closer. This was better than reality TV. This was justice happening in real time. Sandra seized the moment, practically glowing with self-importance. "This gentleman attempted to board Flight 447 using fraudulent diplomatic documents. When questioned, he became evasive and refused standard verification procedures. He may have accomplices." "That's not—" Marcus began. "Sir, please don't interrupt the security briefing," David Walsh cut him off. "You'll have your chance to explain during formal questioning at the federal building." The TSA agent examined the torn passport pieces with theatrical gravity. "These look suspicious to me. Diplomatic passports have specific security features, and I'm not seeing them here. This paper quality is all wrong." He was completely wrong, of course, but authority speaking to authority carries weight, regardless of accuracy. The crowd nodded approvingly at his expertise. 6 minutes to boarding. A woman in scrubs, clearly a nurse heading home from a long shift, shook her head in disgust. "People like this are why honest folks get hassled at airports," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "ruining it for the rest of us." Her companion, a man in a construction vest, nodded vigorously. "Probably stolen someone's identity. You see it on the news all the time. Identity theft is a huge business now." An elderly veteran with a VFW cap stepped forward. "Son, I fought for this country. People like you spitting on our documents make me sick." Marcus's wallet lay open on the table, his driver's license clearly visible. If anyone looked closely, they'd see it listed his occupation as government official and his address as Alexandria, Virginia, a detail that might raise questions about why a government employee would carry fake credentials. But Sandra was orchestrating theater, not conducting investigation. Janet, call airport police immediately, Sandra ordered. We need an official arrest for attempted fraud, interference with airline operations, and possibly terrorism-related activities. The word terrorism sent a shock through the crowd. Several people backed away instinctively. Others pulled out phones to call family members, warning them about what they'd witnessed. A mother clutched her toddler tighter. "Thank God they caught him before he got on the plane," she whispered to her husband. 4 minutes to boarding. Marcus's phone buzzed insistently on the table where Sandra had placed it. Call after call from Washington, D.C. numbers. Text messages with subject lines like Congressional Hearing Prep and DOT Budget Meeting Reminder flashed briefly across the screen. But Sandra had stopped paying attention to evidence. She was drunk on power and public approval. Zoe's live stream hit 2,100 viewers with comments flowing like a waterfall. "They're calling terrorism. About time someone took security seriously. This is so messed up, obvious racial profiling. Get him out of here before he hurts someone. Someone call the ACLU right now. Why won't he just cooperate if he's innocent?" Airport police arrived, 2 officers with serious expressions and handcuffs ready. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, giving them a clear path to Marcus. We understand there has been a document fraud incident with possible national security implications?" the lead officer asked. "Yes, officer," Sandra replied with officious pride. "The subject presented falsified diplomatic credentials and refused all verification procedures. We have everything documented with multiple witnesses and video evidence." The lead officer looked at Marcus with practiced suspicion honed by years of dealing with actual criminals. "Sir, I need to inform you that document fraud is a federal felony punishable by up to 15 years in prison. You have the right to remain silent." 2 minutes to boarding flight 447 to Washington, Dulles. The crowd held its collective breath. This was the climax they'd been waiting for. Justice served in real time, broadcast live to thousands of viewers across social media platforms. Marcus Williams, Deputy Assistant Secretary of Transportation, listened to his Miranda rights while his torn diplomatic passport lay scattered at his feet and his official credentials sat unexamined inches away on a plastic table. The officer reached for his handcuffs, the metal gleaming under the harsh terminal lighting. Countdown. 5 minutes to boarding. The handcuffs clicked open with metallic finality. Officer Rodriguez stepped forward, his partner flanking Marcus's other side. The crowd leaned in collectively, phones raised like digital torches, hungry to capture the moment of justice. "Sir, please turn around and place your hands behind your back," Officer Rodriguez commanded. Marcus remained perfectly still for 3 heartbeats. The terminal fell silent except for the distant hum of jet engines and the soft ping of arriving text messages on his confiscated phone. "I think," Marcus said quietly, his voice carrying despite its low volume, "you should examine my credentials before proceeding." His tone wasn't pleading or desperate. It carried something else entirely, the calm certainty of someone who knew exactly how this would end. Sandra laughed sharply. "We already examined your fake passport, remember? The one you tried to use to commit federal crimes." Marcus turned slowly to face the crowd, his movements deliberate and unhurried. Every eye was locked on him. Zoe's live stream viewer count hit 3,200 and climbing. Without breaking eye contact with Sandra, Marcus reached toward his suit jacket. "Hands where I can see them," Officer Rodriguez barked, his hand moving instinctively toward his weapon. "I'm reaching for my federal identification," Marcus said calmly. "I suggest you allow me to retrieve it." Something in his tone made Officer Rodriguez pause. In 15 years of law enforcement, he'd learned to recognize the difference between guilty panic and righteous confidence. This man wasn't sweating. His pulse wasn't racing. His breathing remained steady. Marcus slowly opened his jacket and withdrew a leather credential case. The movement was deliberate, almost ceremonial. He held it up so everyone could see, then placed it carefully on the inspection table. The crowd pressed closer. Phones zoomed in. Zoe whispered to her audience, "Y'all, something's about to happen. He's way too calm for someone about to be arrested." Marcus opened the credential case with a soft snap that seemed to echo through the terminal. Inside, mounted on official leather backing, was a gold badge bearing the seal of the United States Department of Transportation. Below it, a federal identification card with Marcus's photograph and the words, Deputy Assistant Secretary, in bold lettering. The silence that followed was absolute. Sandra's face went from flushed pink to chalk white in the span of 3 seconds. Her mouth opened, but no sound emerged. David Walsh grabbed the credential case with trembling hands, studying it under the harsh terminal lighting. Adam's apple bobbed frantically as he swallowed hard. "Holy shit," someone in the crowd whispered. Officer Rodriguez leaned over Walsh's shoulder to examine the badge. His partner did the same. Their expressions shifted from professional authority to dawning horror. Marcus spoke into the silence, his voice carrying to every corner of Gate B12. "My name is Marcus Williams. I'm Deputy Assistant Secretary of Transportation, Office of Aviation Consumer Protection. I was traveling to Washington for tomorrow's congressional hearing on discrimination in commercial aviation." He paused, letting that sink in. "The passport you destroyed was issued by the United States Department of State for official government travel." Sandra's legs buckled slightly. She grabbed the counter for support, her face now a sickly gray color. Zoe's live stream exploded. Comments poured in faster than the screen could display. "Holy he's government! Asterisk, she is so fired. Oh, Mog, this is insane. Lawsuit incoming. Karen just got owned." The businessman who'd been recording suddenly lowered his phone, the satisfaction draining from his face. The elderly woman who'd clutched her pearls earlier took an involuntary step backward. Marcus reached for his leather portfolio, moving with the same deliberate calm. Officer Rodriguez made no move to stop him now. From the portfolio, Marcus withdrew an official letter on the Department of Transportation letterhead. "This is my travel authorization for congressional testimony regarding Meridian Airlines' compliance with federal anti-discrimination regulations." He held up the document so the Aviation Weekly blogger could see it clearly. The man's eyes widened as he read the header. "The hearing," Marcus continued, "specifically addresses allegations of racial profiling and discriminatory practices by airline personnel." David Walsh's hands shook as he held the federal ID. "Sir, we had no way of knowing." "You had every way of knowing," Marcus replied evenly. "You chose not to look." Marcus's phone buzzed insistently on the table. He picked it up, noting the 17 missed calls from the Secretary of Transportation's office. "I believe my colleagues have been trying to reach me." Sandra finally found her voice, though it came out as a croak. "How were we supposed to know? You looked—" She stopped herself, but the damage was done. The words hung in the air like smoke. "I looked like what, Miss Martinez?" Marcus asked quietly. Sandra's mouth opened and closed silently. Marcus turned to address the crowd directly. "How many of you assumed I was guilty? How many of you believed I deserved this treatment based on what you saw?" The silence stretched uncomfortably. Several people in the crowd suddenly found their shoes fascinating. "1 minute to board Flight 447. Officer Rodriguez cleared his throat awkwardly. "Sir, we sincerely apologize for this misunderstanding. If you'd like to proceed to your flight." "Oh, I don't think I'll be making this flight," Marcus said calmly. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number from memory. "Sarah, it's Marcus. Cancel the 9 a.m. hearing. We need to move up our timeline." He listened for a moment, then continued. "Because I'm standing in the middle of the exact discrimination case we've been building against Meridian Airlines. Yes, it's all been recorded, multiple witnesses, live stream footage, everything." The crowd began to murmur nervously. Several people started edging toward the exits. Marcus looked directly at Sandra, who appeared to be in shock. "Miss Martinez, you've just provided irrefutable evidence for our federal investigation into Meridian's discriminatory practices." He turned to David Walsh. "Mr. Walsh, I assume you're the duty manager. You might want to call your corporate legal team. Immediately." Walsh fumbled for his radio with shaking hands. Marcus addressed the Aviation Weekly blogger. "I believe you mentioned you were press? You might find tomorrow's Department of Transportation announcement interesting. We'll be releasing comprehensive data on discrimination incidents across major carriers." The blogger was already typing frantically on his phone. Zoe's live stream had reached 5,000 viewers. She whispered to her audience, "Y'all, I can't believe what just happened. This man just turned the whole airport upside down with one ID card." Marcus pocketed his credentials and picked up his messenger bag. Officer Rodriguez, I'll need a copy of your incident report for the federal case file, and I'll need the surveillance footage from the last 30 minutes. He looked around the crowd one final time. The next time you see someone being treated the way I was treated, ask yourself, what if you're wrong? What if that person deserves basic human dignity regardless of what they look like? Marcus Williams walked away from Gate B12, leaving behind a crowd of stunned witnesses and the wreckage of several careers. The real fireworks were just beginning. Marcus didn't go far. He positioned himself at Gate B14, close enough to observe the chaos but far enough to make phone calls without interference. The first number he dialed connected immediately. Secretary Morrison, it's Marcus. We need to accelerate Project Equity flight. Yes, it's happening now. I need you to see the live stream footage before we proceed. Through the glass windows, he watched Sandra collapse into a chair while David Walsh paced frantically, his radio pressed to his ear. Officer Rodriguez was taking statements from witnesses, his notepad filling rapidly with what would soon become federal evidence. Zoe's live stream had exploded to 8,000 viewers and climbed exponentially. She'd moved to a better vantage point and was providing running commentary. Y'all, this man just flipped the entire script. Airport security is going crazy. Management is freaking out, and oh my God, look at all these corporate people showing up. A woman in an expensive business suit was power-walking toward Gate B12, flanked by two men in identical Navy blazers. Corporate crisis management had arrived faster than an ambulance to a heart attack. Marcus's phone rang within minutes. The caller ID showed Meridian Airlines HQ Executive Office. Mr. Williams, this is Patricia Carter, Senior Vice President of Operations for Meridian Airlines. Sir, I understand there's been a serious misunderstanding that we need to address immediately. Miss Carter, Marcus interrupted calmly, pulling up files on his government tablet. There's been no misunderstanding. Your employees performed exactly as we suspected they would. The only surprise is how thoroughly they documented their discrimination for a federal investigation. Sir, if we could arrange a private meeting to discuss this matter confidentially. Miss Carter, are you familiar with Section 49-140-2712 of the Federal Aviation Code regarding discrimination against federal employees? Uncomfortable silence stretched across the connection. It specifically addresses discrimination by airline personnel against federal employees traveling on official business. The penalties include immediate contract review and potential termination of all government agreements worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Marcus pulled up detailed financial data while he spoke, his voice remaining conversational but precise. According to my records, Meridian Airlines currently holds $847 million in active federal contracts across 7 different agencies. Your company transported 312,000 government employees last fiscal year alone, generating approximately $89 million in revenue. Mr. Williams, please understand that this was an isolated incident. Additionally, Marcus continued as if she hadn't spoken, you're currently bidding on the new GSA comprehensive travel contract worth $200 million over 5 years. That bid review committee meeting is scheduled for next Tuesday morning. He watched through the window as more Meridian executives arrived at Gate B12 like vultures circling carrion. Sandra was now surrounded by suits, all talking at once and gesturing frantically. She looked like she might collapse completely. Miss Carter, I assume you're aware that I chair the subcommittee that makes recommendations on that exact contract? The silence this time was deafening. My preliminary report was due Friday. Today's incident has provided me with compelling evidence about your company's commitment to federal anti-discrimination policies. What? What are your expectations moving forward, sir? Marcus consulted his tablet, scrolling through legal precedents and regulatory guidelines. My expectations are simple and non-negotiable. Your company has exactly 72 hours to implement comprehensive anti-discrimination protocols across all operations nationwide. 72 hours seems extremely aggressive for system-wide changes. Miss Carter, let me be crystal clear about the alternatives facing Meridian Airlines. The Department of Transportation has 3 distinct options when federal contractors violate civil rights regulations. Recommend contract renewal, recommend contract modification with penalties, or recommend contract termination with cause. Marcus paused, watching Walsh receive what appeared to be devastating news on his radio. The man's face had gone pale. Contract termination with cause would immediately trigger the morality clause embedded in all your federal agreements. Your company would be permanently barred from federal contracts for 5 years minimum and face immediate cancellation of existing agreements totaling $847 million. He could hear frantic typing and muffled conversations on Carter's end of the call. Emergency meetings were clearly being convened in real time. The comprehensive financial impact would be approximately $1.2 billion in lost revenue over the federal blackout period. Your stock price would likely drop 15 to 20% within hours of the public announcement, and institutional investors would flee immediately. Marcus refreshed his financial monitoring screen. Speaking of stock price, I'm looking at your real-time trading data now, down 2.8% since this incident went viral 35 minutes ago. Current market capitalization loss, $89 million and accelerating. Through the window, he could see someone holding a large tablet, presumably showing the executives the live stream footage that was destroying their company's reputation in real time. Sandra now had her head buried in her hands while security guards positioned themselves nearby. The social media metrics are particularly devastating for your brand, Marcus added clinically. The hashtag #MeridianDisgrace is trending nationally across all major platforms. The original video has been shared 18,000 times in the last 40 minutes, with engagement rates suggesting viral saturation within hours. Patricia Carter's voice was noticeably strained now. What specifically do you need from us to resolve this situation? Immediate corrective actions, all implemented within 24 hours. Sandra Martinez terminated immediately with cause, no severance package. David Walsh demoted to entry-level position and transferred to your lowest volume location. Full investigation of similar incidents company-wide over the past 24 months. Marcus watched as a man in an expensive suit, probably the regional vice president, approached Sandra's chair with what appeared to be termination paperwork. Her firing was happening in real time as he spoke. Your CEO must issue a public video apology within 6 hours, specifically acknowledging systemic discrimination problems and accepting full corporate responsibility, not a written statement. A personal video confession. Mr. Williams, some of those systemic changes would require months of planning and implementation. Then you'd better mobilize every available resource immediately, because in 71 hours and 42 minutes I'm scheduled to testify before the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee about patterns of discrimination in commercial aviation. Marcus let that information detonate like a bomb. If Meridian hasn't demonstrably implemented these changes by then, my congressional testimony will feature today's incident as Exhibit A in a presentation about systemic industry failures requiring legislative intervention. He could hear multiple voices conferring urgently on Carter's end. Legal teams were obviously being summoned for emergency consultation. There's additional context you should understand, Miss Carter. The Justice Department's Civil Rights Division has been quietly monitoring our 18-month investigation into airline discrimination patterns. They're extremely interested in cases that might constitute violations of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Marcus's tone remained conversational, but each word was a precisely aimed arrow. Federal civil rights violations carry personal criminal liability for corporate executives who knew or reasonably should have known about discriminatory practices within their organizations. Are you threatening individual executives with, I'm informing you of established legal precedents. Your company's internal emails, training records, complaint databases, and executive communications are all subject to federal subpoena under civil rights investigations. Marcus pulled up case law on his tablet. If federal investigators discover evidence that discrimination was systematically known and tolerated by management, individual executives face criminal charges including conspiracy to violate civil rights, which carries up to 10 years in federal prison. Through the window, Marcus could see the regional VP speaking rapidly into his phone while pacing in tight circles. Sandra was being formally escorted away from the gate area by corporate security, her employee badge already confiscated. Miss Carter, I assume you're recording this conversation for legal documentation purposes? Yes, sir, as standard protocol. Excellent. Let me state unequivocally for your legal record, you have exactly 72 hours to demonstrate meaningful, measurable, and verifiable systemic change. Not promises, not implementation plans, not pilot programs, actual operational changes. Marcus consulted his timeline documentation. If Meridian fails to meet this non-negotiable deadline, the Department of Transportation will immediately recommend contract termination to all affected federal agencies. The General Services Administration will be formally notified that Meridian Airlines is under active federal investigation for civil rights violations. Mr. Williams, please understand the broader implications. Additionally, I will personally ensure that every government travel coordinator in Washington receives detailed briefings about today's incident. Your company's reputation with federal clients will be permanently and irreparably damaged across the entire government sector. Marcus watched as someone from Meridian's crisis communications team began filming an emergency statement with the regional VP, probably for immediate damage control release. The choice facing your shareholders is mathematically simple, Ms. Carter. 72 hours of intensive, expensive reform implementation, or 5 years of complete federal contract blacklisting worth over $1 billion in lost revenue. We'll implement everything you've requested immediately. I'll be monitoring your progress personally through multiple federal oversight mechanisms. Any backsliding, any attempts to delay implementation, or any efforts to minimize these changes will trigger immediate contract termination recommendations. Marcus ended the call and immediately dialed his next target. Washington Post National Desk? I'd like to speak with your transportation policy correspondent. I have an exclusive breaking story about systemic discrimination in the airline industry with federal contract implications. The reporter was extremely interested indeed. 72 hours later, Thursday, 6 a.m., Marcus sat in his office at the Department of Transportation, watching 3 different news channels simultaneously. CNN was running a breaking news banner. Meridian Airlines fires 47 employees in discrimination purge. Fox Business showed Meridian's stock chart down 11% over 3 days. MSNBC was interviewing civil rights attorneys about the precedent this case might set. His assistant knocked and entered. Sir, Patricia Carter from Meridian is on line 1. She says it's urgent. Marcus picked up the phone. Miss Carter, I trust you have updates for me. Mr. Williams, we've implemented every requirement you specified. Sandra Martinez was terminated Tuesday evening. David Walsh has been transferred to our Billings, Montana location as a baggage handler. 45 additional employees across 12 cities have been dismissed following our internal investigation. Marcus pulled up his monitoring dashboard. I see that. Tell me about the systemic changes. Body cameras have been installed and activated for all 3,200 gate agents nationwide. The AI bias detection system went live yesterday morning. It's already flagged 67 interactions for review. We've terminated 14 more employees based on recorded evidence from just the first 24 hours. The public apology? CEO Richardson's video statement has 2.3 million views. He took full responsibility and announced a $50 million investment in anti-discrimination training. The board has approved mandatory quarterly bias audits by an independent civil rights organization. Marcus scrolled through social media metrics. The hashtag #JusticeForMarcus was trending alongside #Meridian reform. Public opinion was shifting from outrage to cautious approval of the airline's response. Miss Carter, what about the discrimination reporting system? Live as of midnight. Anonymous reporting app, 24/7 hotline staffed by civil rights attorneys, and a zero-tolerance policy with automatic termination for verified incidents. We've already received 87 reports in 12 hours. Marcus made notes on his tablet. Financial compensation for affected passengers? $25 million fund established for passengers who experienced discrimination over the past 5 years. Independent review board to process claims. Average settlement range, $15,000 to $75,000 depending on severity. And the training program? 8-hour mandatory bias training for all customer-facing employees to be completed within 60 days. Follow-up sessions every 6 months. Trainers are certified by the NAACP and the Anti-Defamation League. Marcus checked another screen showing real-time complaint data across the airline industry. Interesting. Your complaint rates have dropped 89% since Tuesday. Industry average is up 23% as passengers report incidents at other carriers. Sir, we believe we've exceeded every requirement you specified. You have. Now let me show you the broader impact. Marcus pulled up a comprehensive report on his main monitor. Wednesday's congressional hearing resulted in the Fair Skies Act, bipartisan legislation requiring all airlines to implement bias detection systems. Your company's crisis became the template for industry-wide reform. He could hear Carter breathing heavily on the other end. The Department of Transportation is establishing a new Office of Aviation Equity with a $200 million annual budget for discrimination prevention and enforcement. I've been nominated to head that office. Congratulations, sir. Miss Carter, your federal contracts have been renewed. The $200 million GSA travel contract has been awarded to Meridian Airlines, conditional on maintaining these new standards. Relief was audible in Carter's voice. Thank you, Mr. Williams. We won't let you down. You'd better not, because this is now the federal template for airline accountability. Thursday, 2 p.m., press conference. The Department of Transportation briefing room was packed with reporters. Marcus stood at the podium, flanked by Secretary Morrison and the Attorney General. 3 days ago, a simple case of travel discrimination became a catalyst for the most comprehensive airline industry reform in decades, Marcus began. The Fair Skies Act, signed this morning by the President, requires all commercial airlines to implement real-time bias monitoring, mandatory bias training, and independent oversight within 180 days. A reporter raised her hand. Mr. Williams, what's been the industry response? All major carriers have contacted the department requesting expedited compliance assistance. Delta, United, American, and Southwest have announced similar programs to Meridian's. Nobody wants to be the next viral discrimination case. Another reporter. What about Sandra Martinez and the other terminated employees? Miss Martinez has been permanently banned from aviation industry employment through the new federal registry. She's currently facing federal charges for destruction of government property and violation of civil rights under color of authority. Marcus clicked to his next slide showing statistical data. David Walsh, the duty manager, pled guilty to federal conspiracy charges yesterday. He's serving 2 years probation and 1,000 hours of community service teaching bias awareness. The financial impact on Meridian? Total cost of compliance, approximately $127 million. However, their federal contract renewals are worth $1.1 billion over 5 years. They made the right choice. Marcus advanced to a slide showing social media analytics. The viral video has generated over 15 million views across all platforms. It's been translated into 12 languages and is being used in corporate training worldwide. A CNN correspondent stood up. Some critics say this was government overreach. How do you respond? The federal government spends $34 billion annually on airline travel for employees. We have both the right and the responsibility to ensure that money doesn't support discriminatory practices. Marcus clicked to his final slide. More importantly, this case demonstrates that individual actions have consequences. One gate agent's decision to tear up a passport triggered the largest civil rights investigation in aviation history. Thursday, 8 p.m., Marcus's home. Marcus sat in his home office reviewing implementation reports from airlines across the country. His phone buzzed with a text from Zoe, the college student who'd live-streamed the original incident. Mr. Williams, my TikTok followers want to know, how does it feel to change an entire industry in 3 days? Marcus smiled and typed back, change doesn't happen in 3 days. It happens when one person refuses to accept injustice, and others have the courage to document and share the truth. Another text arrived, this one from his congressional liaison. Sir, 6 more airlines have requested meetings about voluntary compliance ahead of the deadline. The industry is racing to avoid another Meridian situation. Marcus pulled up the latest discrimination complaint statistics. Across all major carriers, reported incidents had dropped 67% in just 3 days. The Meridian effect was rippling through the entire industry. His secure phone rang. Secretary Morrison's voice was jubilant. Marcus, I just got off the phone with the president. You're being nominated for the new aviation equity position. Senate confirmation hearings start next month. Thank you, Madam Secretary. Though I should mention, I'm planning to be much tougher on the industry than they expect. Good. After this week, they'll take you seriously. Marcus hung up and opened his laptop to begin drafting new federal regulations. The Fair Skies Act was just the beginning. Real change required sustained pressure and constant vigilance. On his desk sat a framed copy of his torn diplomatic passport, now evidence in a federal case that had rewritten the rules for an entire industry. 3 days ago, Sandra Martinez had thought she was dealing with just another passenger to humiliate. Instead, she'd triggered the most comprehensive civil rights victory in aviation since deregulation. The irony was perfect. Her attempt to deny Marcus his dignity had given millions of travelers more protection than they'd ever had before. Intelligence had triumphed over ignorance. Preparation had defeated prejudice, and one calm voice had changed an industry forever. 6 months later, March 15th, Marcus Williams adjusted his new nameplate, Director, Federal Aviation Equity Office. Through his window at DOT headquarters, he could see the Capitol Dome where the Fair Skies Act had passed with overwhelming bipartisan support. His computer screen displayed the morning's industry statistics. Airline discrimination complaints down 78% nationwide. The Meridian Protocol had become the gold standard, copied by transportation systems across 4 continents. A knock interrupted his thoughts. His assistant entered with a tablet. "Sir, the 6-month impact report is ready for your review." Marcus scrolled through the data with quiet satisfaction. Meridian Airlines had become the industry leader in customer satisfaction, their stock price up 23% since implementing the reforms. Other carriers were competing to exceed federal requirements rather than meet minimums. The human cost had been equally transformative. Sandra Martinez was working at a discount retail store in suburban Chicago. Her aviation career permanently ended. David Walsh was completing his community service, teaching bias awareness to high school students. Both had become cautionary tales in business ethics courses nationwide. But the real victory was in the numbers that mattered. 47,000 airline employees retrained, 340 discriminatory incidents prevented by AI monitoring, and $89 million in compensation paid to victims of past discrimination. Marcus's phone buzzed with a familiar notification. Zoe Carter, now a senior at Northwestern studying civil rights law, had tagged him in another TikTok video. She'd built a following of 2.8 million people by documenting discrimination cases and their resolutions. Her latest video showed Marcus speaking at a United Nations conference on transportation equity. The caption read, "When one person refuses to stay silent, they can change the world. #JusticeWorks, #SpeakUp." Marcus typed a response. "Thank you for being brave enough to document the truth. Your courage that day started everything." The ripple effects continued expanding. 3 documentary crews were filming the story. Harvard Business School taught a case study called The $200 Million Passport. The Smithsonian had requested Sandra's original termination letter for their Civil Rights Museum. Most importantly, travelers felt safer. Parents no longer worried about their children facing discrimination at airports. Federal employees could focus on serving their country instead of proving their worth to gate agents. Marcus opened his desk drawer and pulled out the framed remnants of his diplomatic passport, now a symbol recognized worldwide. The torn pieces represented more than personal vindication. They embodied the principle that dignity cannot be destroyed, only revealed. Your voice matters. Your story counts. When you witness discrimination, document it safely. When you experience injustice, know your rights. When you have power, any power, use it to protect others who have less. Every phone recording, every shared video, every person who refuses to look away when others are mistreated contributes to a more just world. Share this story if you believe change is possible. Comment with your own experiences of standing up to discrimination. Subscribe to Black Soul Stories for more tales of quiet strength overcoming systemic injustice. Because sometimes the most powerful revolutions begin with a single person who simply refuses to accept that this is just how things are. Change happens when preparation meets opportunity and when courage meets cameras.